today for our late little lunch, we are going to bake up a sourdough loaf because it really needs to get baked up. And then we're gonna make a Italian sausage, kale, and white bean soup, kind of a little Tuscan vibe to it, and some scotcheroos. But let's get our sourdough loaf out here. It's been in my fridge for just a little over 3 days, which means it needs to be baked up today. So the longer it sits in there, the more likely it sticks to your cheesecloth. So we're just gonna gently peel it back. And then we're gonna score this, pop this in the oven to bake up, and it will be delicious. Sometimes I'll prep up loaves and then I'm like, oh, I've gotta get these out and baking. There we go. Who wants to fight with me today? There we go. But no matter if it comes out of here not looking the greatest, it will bake up nice. Assuming I can get it off. So sometimes we just have to work a little bit harder. You know what? I'm just gonna peel it off this way. That way I can separate it easily. Here we go. It's just sticking to our Banneton, our cheesecloth here. There we go. Okay. We'll make sure that's where we have our thing. Okay. Now it's spreading out because it's on the higher end of being proofed, but doesn't mean it's going to be a bad loaf. It just means it's not going to pop up quite as big, but it will still taste delicious. And I always say, I'm one not to throw away anything that we've prepped up because it's going to be delicious no matter what. We're gonna pop this in our Dutch oven and we're gonna bake it up because waste not, want not. Okay, let's slide this guy in here and pop it in there. And once it bakes, you're gonna get a big pop from it, which will even out some of the wrinkliness of it from it falling to the ground. But we're gonna go pop this in the oven and we're gonna bake it at 500 for 20 minutes. With the lid on, and then we're gonna bake it for 20 minutes at 450 with the lid off. And then by then, our scotcheroos and our soup should all be done. So let's get our timer, 20 minutes at 500. Now we're gonna start, we're gonna dice up our onion, start sauteing that, and we'll add in our Italian sausage, prep our veggies, work on our scotcheroos. So, let's get our onion. You know what? Let's get our sausage cooking first. That way we can cook our onion in a little bit of our sausage grease. So we're using just a mild Italian sausage here. You could use the sausage links if you want to. But I find in the soup, I do love sometimes when it's a crumble versus the little sausage balls. So let's take that off. And let me go wash my hands real quick, and then we're going to break it up and let it saute. Okay, let me grab a little spatula here, and we're going to break this guy up into our little things, and then I have mine heating up over, about a 7, so a medium high, because we're going to start kind of sauteing it up, and then we'll cook our onions in it. But it's a nice thing. It's like a simple but delicious soup. And I've got this. It's the weather right now. It's very fall, so I've got those vibes on here. So let's get our onion. I've got one whole yellow onion. We're going to kind of take off the whole outside bit here. And there we go. We're going to cut it in half and then slice it up. And then we're just going to do kind of a smaller dice on it. That way you have nice little bits of onions in every bite. And it will add great flavor to our broth, as well as just be delicious. And then once we were going to prep up this, we're going to prep up some of our celery too. And then we're going to start on our scotcheroos, making the base to them. Because we'll add sugar and corn syrup together. Kind of let that bubble up for a little bit, and then we'll add in some peanut butter. But we're gonna use a couple stalks of celery here. I'm gonna say about 4 plus a little teeny tiny one in here. We're gonna cut off the bottom part since it's not as nice. And then I've got my top, since that tends to dry out. And because I don't want my celery to be too large, I'm going to go right down the middle and kind of score each one in half. There we go. And we'll get this little guy in the middle. Keep your leaves. The leaves have a nice, lovely celery flavor to it as well. And always adds a little pop of greenery as well. And again, just nice small pieces. You don't want to have huge chunks of celery in here because you want it kind of all to kind of blend together well, but it is lovely. If you don't like the finished end product of celery, leave your celery in bigger chunks. That way you can just pull them out and you won't have them in your soup after it, but they do add a great flavor to the broth. So you definitely want to use it when we're making the base part. Okay. Let's get our sausage here. I'm going to kind of break it up into nice little chunks. There we go. And we'll let that kind of cook up just a little bit. I'm going to turn it down to a 6 now that my Dutch oven's nice and hot. I'm going to rinse my hands just get a little bit of that onion flavor off. And then we're going to start making the base for our scotcheroos. So we need 1.5 cups of sugar and 1.5 cups of corn syrup. And you want light corn syrup. And we're going to put them together in our saucepan, and then we're going to bring them to a boil. Once they reach that boiling point, you want to boil it for about 30 seconds. Don't boil it too long, or you're going to have like more of a crunchier scotcheroo. Just 30 seconds to get that nice, soft, chewy base for it. So let's add in our 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. And this is going to make a big batch of scotcheroos because when I make scotcheroos, I make a big batch because they're my favorite dessert ever. So we're going to add in 1 cup and then 1/2 more. So 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. And then we're going to do equal parts 1.5 cups of corn syrup. And this is going to give you, and if you've never heard of a scotcheroo is kind of like a peanut butter Rice Krispie treat, but you don't use marshmallows, you make the syrup, and you have a chocolate coating on the top that has butterscotch in it. And that gives you a little bit of that scotcheroo flavor to it and makes it just delicious. So we're going to do 1.5 cups of our corn syrup. So this is our first cup. And then I'm going to do about 1/2 cup more. There we go. And this is, for the rest of it, we're going to use about 2.5 cups of peanut butter, creamy peanut butter, as well as 9 cups of Rice Krispies. So as you can see, this is going to make a pretty good size. And then I'm going to just mix all of this in, and then we'll put it on our back burner over a medium heat, and we're going to let this come to a nice boil. And then once it gets that rolling boil, again, just 30 seconds, and then we'll remove it from the heat. Here we go. So I always like to make sure it's mixed up first before putting it over. And we're going to put that over, I want to say like a 6, 7, so like a medium-high heat. Okay, we're going to kind of mix up these Italian sausage. And just kind of break it apart because you don't want to have too big of chunks in there. There we go. Okay, while we're waiting for these to kind of finish up with their little, toasting up, I'm going to prep our sweet potato and our butternut squash. These are going to add, it kind of makes like a fall version of the Tuscan soup. and I just love them both in here. And I had a little bit of butternut squash left up, as well as some sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes will hold their form a little bit better in the soup than the butternut squash. A little bit more of an intense flavor, while butternut squash is a little bit softer and smoother in the flavor. So we're going to peel off this whole kind of outer bit. This is kind of a weird shaped sweet potato, but I find it's just easier to do it with a good old chef knife than it is to try to get your peeler out. And then we're going to make nice little small, kind of dice it up nice and small so that they'll cook up pretty quickly.
You have a question. Could you sub in a regular potato if you don't like sweet potatoes?
Yes. So I make a version of this soup, not during the fall time, where I actually use regular potatoes in it. And it's absolutely lovely because the potato and the white bean works really well together. So you could definitely use like a regular potato. I'm just using the sweet potato and the butternut squash to make it more of a fall vibe because I like to embrace the fall. It was one of those things where I was looking at, I had to clean out our fish tank the other day, and I was like, you know what, next year I'm gonna buy a haunted house to go in my fish tank because I need to add a little fall vibe in there and some little like Halloween decorations. I've already got my game on for, Christmas, that I'm gonna get a little gingerbread house to go in there and a little Christmas tree and some little things to go in my fish tank. So I always like to embrace the seasons, maybe a bit too much, as my husband might say, but I've got my children all on my side and they love my things. So butternut squash it is.
You have a question. Do you have a cookbook out?
I don't have a cookbook. That's my goal this year, is to work on it. I do send out recipe cards for my members every week. But that is kind of one of my goals on there, is to maybe find a way to translate some of those recipe cards into a cookbook with a couple other ones and have it out hopefully next year. It's on my radar because you'd be surprised how many times I get asked if I have a cookbook. So definitely want to. But we do offer recipe cards for our members, and we upload our lives to the link on our page so everybody can recreate these recipes just by rewatching the video. I try to make sure I go through all of the steps, that way everybody can recreate it. Here we go. So we're going to cut up our sweet potato again, nice small little diced up. Again, if you don't like sweet potatoes or butternut squash, you can always do it with regular potatoes or sub in carrots as well for it. So we've got one sweet potato. There we go. And then I've been using this butternut squash for so many different things. So we're finally going to get to the end of it. We've got the bulbous part left, which is always the hardest part to kind of peel up. But we're going to take off our bottom, and now we're going to do it similar to how we did our sweet potato. I'm just going to use my chef knife to peel it. And just kind of going around the edges, and then I'll cut it in half. We'll scoop out the seeds, and we'll kind of cube it up just like we did with the sweet potatoes. Although I will say my previous self used the easier part of the sweet potato, or the butternut squash, to cut up. But the bulbous part, it has great flesh on it. It's just more work. Okay, we're gonna cut this down the middle, and we're going to scrape out our seeds. So while it looks like we have a lot more to it, since it is very bulbous in the middle, we don't have as much, but that's why we added some sweet potatoes in as well. Okay, give this a good stir. I'm going to grab a spoon so we can scoop that out. And then we're going to give our base here a little bit of a stir, because again, we're getting there. It hasn't come to a rolling boil yet. It takes a hot minute. Just resist the urge to put it too high, because you don't want to scald or burn your sugar at the bottom. So once all of that's kind of dissolved and you have a nice rolling boil to it, then it'll be nice and ready. Okay. We're going to scoop out these seeds. Luckily, they come out pretty easy. And then we'll be able to cube up this rest of this for our soup. There we go. And easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, let's dice this up, and I'm going to keep these pretty much similar size as our sweet potatoes here, because they'll both kind of cook up, you know, around the same time. Okay. And throw it in here, and they'll be lovely. You could always, again, get your pre-peeled and diced up butternut squash at, you know, the grocery store. The only thing that I recommend not doing is the frozen one. That one gets pretty mushy and it doesn't really hold its shape when you go to put it in a soup. So fresh is always the best. Here we go. It looks like we've got actually a good amount. I might save this half for another day. It's a gift that keeps on giving. My husband does not agree with that sentiment. He is not a fan of squash, but I always say just pretend it's not there. Eat around it. Okay, it looks like our onions and our celery and our meat are doing pretty good. I'm going to turn this down to about a 5 now. And we're going to throw in our sweet potatoes and our butternut squash that we have diced up. And we are going to mix it in there and start to saute it.
For those who want to sub in regular potatoes, how many potatoes and what type?
So I would do a Yukon Gold potato because it's going to hold its form. Russets will just disintegrate. And since those are about smaller potatoes, I would do about 3 of the larger ones of those or 4 of the smaller to medium-sized ones. Since if you kind of think of it here, we've got about 2, you know, bigger size like russet potatoes here. But for our, you put it in there. So I would say 4 of the average size Yukon Gold. And just dice them up just the same. Keep the skins on because the skins are delicate with those potatoes. You don't need to peel them. In a pinch, russets can work, but russets are not as waxy and so they don't hold their form and they will disintegrate over time. So they don't work quite as well in soup. Okay, let's get some of our scraps out of the way here. And we're gonna give our base a nice stir. You just wanna check on it every so often and stir it. You don't need to constantly stir it, but you wanna keep it pretty frequent so that it doesn't burn. Here we go. I can tell that it's starting to get closer to it because as you can see, it is more runny. As the hotter it gets, that's the sugar dissolving. So it should be up to a boil pretty soon, and then we'll let it boil just for about 30 seconds, and then we'll remove it. That's the one thing you have to be very careful with it. You can't over boil it. Okay, we're gonna give this a nice kind of scrape around, and then I'm going to add in our spices, and we are going to put it there. We'll put our kale in once we have our broth. We won't add that in until later because we don't want it to kind of wilt up too much. We're gonna do kind of a wide variety of spices here, but they'll all add some great flavor and complexity. So we've got some rosemary. We're gonna add about a half a teaspoon. Rosemary has a pretty strong flavor. If you're using fresh, you can go a little bit more, but I wouldn't go too heavy on it because the flavor profile is pretty strong. We're gonna do about a teaspoon of dried oregano. There we go, shake, shake, shake. And we're gonna throw in about 2 bay leaves. Well, we'll do these 3 teeny tiny ones in there to make about 2. And then the nice thing that's really gonna give it a nice thing is some herb de Provence. This is kind of like, I always say, it's like your French Italian, you know, it's like your French seasoning. You have your Italian seasoning, this is like your French seasoning. There we go. So you're gonna put in about, you know, a teaspoon of that in there as well. We're gonna mix this all up, kind of let it sit for a second, hydrate those nice little spices.
Do you have questions? Is there a stock to this?
Yes, we are going to add in some chicken broth, or well, I like to do water with chicken bouillon. So that's gonna be the base of it. We're gonna add in about 4 cups of it in there. But I always saute up my vegetables and my meats before, and I don't like to just dump them into a soup. This brings more flavor into the broth. There we go. So we're getting close. I can see there's a little bit of movement starting to happen, so we're almost there. There we go. But again, with this, the crucial part is once it comes to a boil, you have to pay attention, because if you overboil this, then you won't have a chewy scotcheroo. You're gonna have a drier, crunchier scotcheroo. And the best part about it is the chewy peanut butter part. So don't overdo it. Okay, since we've got our spices in here, let me just check before good. By the time we get our mixture in, then we'll be ready to head over to do the second part of our sourdough bread. So we're gonna start by adding in just about a cup of our broth here, or our water. We're gonna add in chicken bouillon, but you could use chicken broth if you wanted to, or vegetable. Both work really well for this. So you're gonna add in just a cup first, and then what you're gonna do with your spatula or spoon is make sure you scrape the bottom of your pan. That's going to release any of those spices or little bits of sausage that have cooked on, which will grab it or just give it really great flavor. Here we go. Beautiful. Before we add any more, look, we've got a nice boil on it. So I'm gonna give it a stir, and now it's kind of our countdown. Again, also, if you leave this unattended, it will go everywhere. So, got about 10 seconds left, and then we're gonna remove it from the heat. There we
You
go.
have a question? Can you go over what a scotcheroo is?
Yes, so a scotcheroo, which is a very common in the Midwest, but I realize it's not outside of the Midwest, because they don't have them here in Tennessee. But it is like a Rice Krispie treat, but almost a peanut butter based Rice Krispie treat, but it looks like one, but it has also a chocolate topping on it with butterscotch chips in it. So you get that butterscotch flavor with the peanut butter, and it's really, really lovely. Okay, we've got our nice base here. Now I'm gonna give this a stir. We're gonna add in a little bit more. Add another cup in. Kind of mix it up. Once our soup is kind of simmering, after a few minutes, we'll add in our kale and our white beans. We're gonna use cannellini beans. Cannellini. I always say it wrong, guys. But we'll add those in. Our sourdough is going there, so before we add that last bit, let's go check on our sourdough. We're gonna take our lid off and bake it for 450 for the last 20 minutes. Okay. Beautiful. See, I told you guys it would puff up even if it was a little wonky getting in there, but looking pretty great. We're gonna put it in our oven here with the lid off for the last 20 minutes, but let me cancel it. You've got to bring the temperature down to 450. If you cook it at 500, you're going to have a really dark brown crust. And I like a blonder crust on mine because it gives you a chewier, like sourdough that isn't as crunchy. I like that chewy crust, not a crunchy crust. So we've got our timer on. Let me make sure I set it there. Yes, everything is set. I once turned off the oven in mid-baking, so I don't want to do that again. Okay, we've got that. Let's add in our remaining little bit. Here we go. And so I've got about 4 cups in here. If you want an even brothier base, you can go even more. But I always like my soups to be chock full of vegetables and really hearty and not as much broth, unless it's like a miso-based soup. And then we're gonna add in our chicken bouillon. This is gonna add flavor to the broth and depth, as well as the saltiness, so you shouldn't need to add any salt. We're gonna do a big heaping spoonful, so it's a little over a tablespoon. And we'll mix that in, and that should be just enough to give the right amount of salty flavor to it, as well as the rich kind of chicken broth flavor. There we go. And then I'm gonna grab a little bit and we're gonna try it. Perfect. We're gonna let this come to a simmer. Once it's simmering for a good few minutes, then we will add in our kale and our white beans. But let's finish up making our scotcheroos here. Okay. Now we need to add in our peanut butter to our base here. And we're gonna need about 2.5 cups of peanut butter. Again, eyeballing it, you don't have to be exact, but you wanna make sure your mixture hasn't cooled down or it will be impossible to mix it in. So I'm gonna use this as my visual cue about how much peanut butter to add in. I will say, err on the side of putting too much versus too little, because the peanut butter and having lots of it in here, it's about a cup, makes these the best. So we're at about a cup and a half. So they have a lot of peanut butter in here, but they are worth it. And I think this is why they're my favorite meal. So once I think we're just gonna use up the rest of this jar because there's barely any in it. But 2.5 cups of creamy peanut butter. It needs to be creamy, and it needs to be something like Jif or, you know, like not the super healthy peanut butter, because those are just, if you're eating a scotcheroo, you don't want it to be healthy.
You have a question? Could you use crunchy?
Crunchy will put nuts in your thing, and I personally don't like it in there. Now, if you don't mind it, you could definitely add it in there. Crunchy is also not quite as, quite the same texture. And we're essentially diluting this peanut butter into our sugar mixture here. And this is what we're gonna pour over it, so it might mess with what base you have. So I've never done it before. I've always done it with creamy, because I don't think I'd want a crunchy nut in my scotcheroo. But you could always try. You know, here we go. I'm gonna mix this in, and it's making like a peanut butter lava. And we're just gonna get it all kind of combined in here. That's why you wanna do it while it's still hot, but not, you know, you need it to sit for like 30 seconds to a minute after you've done boiling it. You don't scorch it. Here we go. And this is what's going to hold your scotcheroos together. Now these are kind of similar to like Rice Krispie treats. You can't just eat them right away. They need to come back down to room temperature to set, or they'll be like really sticky. But once they've cooled off, they firm up and hold together really well, but they'll be nice and chewy. They're like, you know what, we were talking about this. They're almost like the old school version of a whatchamacallit. I always feel like that's what a whatchamacallit was based off of, is a scotcheroo. So that's kind of like the flavors here. Okay, looks like we've got this fairly mixed in. So let's measure out our Rice Krispies, and then we'll pour this over and mix it in. So we need about 9 cups of Rice Krispies, which is perfect for a 9 by 13 inch pan. Okay, just take these lid off here because it's pretty full. We're gonna do this in a nice big bowl, so it's easy. Okay, that's about a cup there. And then we'll check on our soup in just a second. Right now it's still simmering. It's not quite to a nice boil yet, but we'll add in our kale and our white beans. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Don't add too many Rice Krispies because then it makes the peanut butter mixture spread too thin and it's not as good. I will say these are my recipe I've perfected over the time to make it perfect the way I love it, which is with this lovely sticky peanut butter base that is amazing.
For the soup, can kale be substituted with spinach, and would you change anything to do it?
Yes, you can definitely add spinach in place of the kale. Just add it in right before you're about to serve it. Spinach wilts up very, very quickly and kind of just disappears in your soup. So if you add it at the very, very end, right before serving, it will just have like barely wilted and therefore still be more leafy versus kind of just, going to nothing. Okay. Let's mix these guys up in here. As you can see, this peanut butter base is going completely cover all of the Rice Krispies. Here we go. And you can see it almost has that like stretchy pull, just like if you do like Rice Krispie treats, like the marshmallows. Beautiful. Okay. We're gonna let that sit here for just a second. Let's give our soup a little bit of a stir here. We're getting close to almost a nice simmer. It's starting to get a little broth foamy, so we'll be ready.
Nisha sent you a gift.
Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate that a lot. Once we get our soup here, once it comes to a nice boil, we're gonna add in our kale and our beans. You don't need to add those in towards the end of cooking because the beans are already pre-cooked. And the kale, we'll chop it up, but you don't want it to get so tender over time. You want it to still keep its body. Okay, before we put this in our thing, we have our makeshift double boiler here, which don't ever buy a double boiler. Literally a pan with a metal bowl on top with a little bit of water works. You don't need to get all bougie. We're gonna bring this to a boil and we're gonna melt our chocolate chips and our butterscotch chips. Now this is the one where my variation of the recipe really changes. I like a little bit of butterscotch flavor, not a lot. So I do about 2 cups of chocolate chips with a half a cup of butterscotch. I find if you do a whole cup of butterscotch, it's just a lot of butterscotch flavor because it's a pretty strong flavor. But I do like a mild amount of it. So a half a cup gives you that butterscotch flavor without, feeling like grandma was baking you some cookies. So just a half a cup. Now, if you absolutely love butterscotch and you want more of it, then go to a whole cup. But less is more in my opinion. Okay, we're gonna let that sit there. Since this has got a nice boil to it, we'll get our kale in here and then we will put our scotcheroos in there, my baking pan. So I don't just chop up the kale. I first take it off the big stem here because that stem is more of a sulfury flavor to it. It's not quite as nice on here. You can also just buy like baby kale is wonderful because then you don't have to do any work. But we're gonna throw it in here. I've got it. We'll fold off. We're gonna chop it up because if you just leave it like this, then when you're eating a soup, you're gonna have this just huge long leaf. And once you chop it, it gets smaller and smaller. But I like to aim for about, 1.5 to 2 cups of kale, or about, if we're doing baby kale, about 2 big handfuls. And again, you can add spinach, but before spinach, I would just wait till the very end, right before serving, to throw it in so that it doesn't completely wilt away. Go. Looking pretty good. So we're gonna add this in and then we'll give this a good mix and let it soften up and cook up. And that's, I will say, the nice thing about kale over spinach, both very similar flavors, add that pop of green, but kale keeps its shape a little bit better, doesn't get as soft. Okay, I'm gonna bring this down to about a 4 or 5 to simmer, and then let's get our baking pan here. Now what I'm going to do to make sure that it won't stick to my pan is you're just going to spritz it with a little bit of olive oil. Let me grab my other one. This allows it to not stick when you want to go to cut it out, and it will slide it out. and just spray it down. You could always line it with parchment paper, but I find that this works really well. Now you need to make sure you spread it out while it's still warm, because again, once it cools off completely, it's going to firm up. So we're gonna scoop this base in here. There we go. And you can see how it's even starting to hold together now that it is starting to cool. And it's just going to be fabulous. Okay. We're gonna press it out, and then, just like with Rice Krispie treats, you're gonna need to get a piece of parchment paper and push it down to take out any gaps of air in there so that it doesn't get fluffy when you try to cut it. So I'm gonna spread it out evenly first, and then.
And what do you definitely not use? Instead of parchment, you tried?
Oh, yes, wax paper. Although I feel like this is not quite as sticky as the Rice Krispie treat, but don't use wax paper. I made that mistake and it stuck to it. So don't do that. I ended up just having to throw the wax paper out and do it. But just firmly push it down. You want to just close up all of the gaps in here so that it kind of makes a nice firm and condensed.
And you have a question, is the recipe for the scotcheroos posted anywhere?
I do believe I have this as a freebie to everybody out in the spring. So you'll have to go look for it, but I do believe I have this recipe card available for everyone. As well, you can always rewatch the video and make it on here because I try to go through every single measurement on live. So we've got it nice pushed down. Let me give it a little bit more even. But as you see how it just kind of forms like a peanut butter caramel. But it's just, these are my favorite desserts. But again, the one thing that I will warn you with is don't skimp on the peanut butter and don't overcook the sugar and cornstarch mixture, because that will cause you to have crunchy rice. They're crunchy, I was going to say snickerdoodles, scotcheroos, and you don't want that. They're supposed to be chewy and delicious. Here we go. We've got it starting to melt. I've mixed again. This is 2 cups of chocolate chips with a 1/2 cup of butterscotch, and it's starting to melt up on the bottom here in our makeshift double boiler. So again, just use your pot with a little bit of water on it underneath and put a metal bowl or a glass bowl on it. There we go. Now we'll let that sit for a little bit. Okay, now that our kale is in here, let's get our white beans. I'm using, I always say these wrong, cannellini. I always want to say cannellini beans, but it's not that. We're gonna rinse them. Don't ever just pour your beans in there with all of this liquid. It just is a starchy mess that will dilute the flavor of your broth and give it a funky texture. So we're gonna strain them and rinse them. Now you don't need to rinse them long, but just enough to get off some of that starchy water. There we go. Couple good shakes. And then we add it in. And since these are canned beans, they're already nice and soft, so you don't need to worry about cooking them for a long time or whatnot. That's why I like to add them in towards the end so they don't get mushy or overcooked. There we go. I'm gonna turn this guy because we've got some nice boiling going on underneath. Beautiful. And the reason why, if you've always wondered why people do chocolate in a double boiler on top of it, is chocolate has a pretty low fat content in it, which means if you put it on direct heat, it's going to scorch your chocolate or burn it. So doing it with a steam bath like this is going to allow it to melt smoothly without it getting burnt on yours. So that's why we're doing this, but you don't need to have a fancy double boiler. You can literally just use a bowl and, and I put maybe like an inch of water at the bottom.
You got a question, what type of soup is this, and will there be a recipe posted?
So this soup is my fall version of a Tuscan white Italian sausage and Tuscan white bean soup, but instead of potatoes, we're using sweet potatoes and butternut squash. I might make this soup a recipe card this week for our members, but again, for everyone else, we will always post our lives on there, so you can always recreate these. Look at this. Our chocolate is just about perfect. You just want to make sure that you have no lumps. And again, this was 2 cups of chocolate chips with a half a cup of butterscotch. If you love a little bit more butterscotch, then you can add up to a cup of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, let me grab, it's nice and hot. We're going to pour this over the top of our scotcheroos, the base here, and then you can do 2 ways. You can leave them on your counter overnight till the chocolate is firmed up, or it's about 6 hours, or you can pop them in your fridge for about 2 hours, and this chocolate on top will be nice and firm, and that's when you know that they'll be ready to eat. So this is one that you have to be patient for, which is not something I'm good with scotcheroos, because I just love scotcheroos.
You have a question. Could you melt the chocolate in the microwave?
Melting the chocolate in the microwave does not work unless you add a bit of fat to it. But if you add fat to it, like butter or coconut oil, then you're not going to have a firm chocolate topping to it. So I wouldn't recommend doing it because it will scorch your chocolate in there. So really the best bet is to do it with, over a pan with some water. Or if you really don't want to do it in a crock pot, you could put it in a crock pot that will heat it up slowly. Okay, we're going to spread this out, and this is going to give us this lovely chocolate topping on it. Here we go. And if you really want it to be bougie or festive, you could throw some Halloween sprinkles on top of this to make a little festive one. But these are so good. Every time I go to visit my sister up in Iowa and to her lake house in Minnesota, we stop at all of the Casey's gas stations and Hy-Vee's there, which is a grocery store, so I can get my scotcheroos because I just love them, and they're just nowhere to be found in the South unless I make them myself.
Do the Casey's down here not sell them?
I don't know. I've not actually visited a Casey's in the South, so maybe I'll have to check it out next time I see one. Okay, we've got these on here. Beautiful. Let's check. Oh, perfect. We've got like 1 minute left on there. So I'm going to give our soup a nice stir. I'm going to taste it one more time, see if we need to add anything. But our butternut squash, I can tell this is the butternut squash. You can already tell it's nice and soft, it's nice and translucent. And then we have our sweet potatoes, which is going to be more of a tender firm to it, but it holds its shape a little bit better than the squash. Okay, let's taste it. Perfect. So I'm going to turn this down to a low, low, low. And let's start heading over to the oven to grab out our sourdough because it is about to beep. And that's the beauty of it. Nice hunk of sourdough bread with soup. Okay, we have about 10 seconds left. Looking gorgeous here. We got our nice golden brown, our sourdough loaf on it. We got some extra bubbles in here. And we're gonna flip this out and we will have nice bread to go with it. Okay, I always take it out of my Dutch oven right after baking because you don't want it to get there. But look how we've got this nice golden brown crust there and gorgeous. And this was the one I always said we had to bake up. It was popped in our refrigerator. So this is day 3 of it proofing, which is like the last day that you can do it. 1 and 2 give you perfect loaf. Day 3, it's still gonna taste amazing, but not as pretty of a pop. But still delicious. Okay guys, let's get a bowl and we'll get ready to serve up our lunch. We have to let our sourdough cool for, about 10 minutes before we can cut into it. But we'll have our soup, and then tonight with dinner, we will have our scotcheroos, which will be perfect because my plan is to do a lo mein with like teriyaki pork meatballs for dinner, and I always like to have a little bit of sweetness with it. Well, let me grab a ladle here, and we're gonna serve up our soup, and then we're gonna grate some Parmesan cheese over it. That will melt into it and just make it absolutely lovely. Okay. So this is our fall version of our Tuscan white bean soup. We have Italian sausage in it, celery, onions, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, kale, and then we have a nice light broth that we seasoned with rosemary, oregano, herbs de Provence, and chicken bouillon. And we are going to top it with some freshly grated Parmesan cheese, which is going to be amazing. It's going to melt into the soup and add just a lovely richness to it. And we will serve this with a slice of our sourdough bread, which will be beautiful for dipping into our broth. And then later tonight, we will be able to enjoy our scotcheroos. We'll have that nice chewy peanut butter and Rice Krispie base with the chocolate and butterscotch topping. Well guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of your recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made. So we've got our fall Tuscan bean soup with scotcheroos and sourdough bread. And you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my cutting boards, I've got my baking sheets, my Dutch ovens, all the different things that I use in the kitchen. I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for